All right, all you cats and kittens out there, we're going to be talking about blood today. So before we jump into the parts of blood and things like that, let's have a few fun blood facts, useless trivia that you'll never need to know. So the average adult has approximately 5 to 6 quarts of blood. That translates to about 4.7 to 5.6 liters, and 2 pints is a quart. So you got tons of pints of blood. You've got between 10 and 12 pints of blood. So when you donate a pint of blood with the Red Cross, you're donating about 8 to 10% of your blood volume. Okay, so blood is a connective tissue, which if you remember way back to the beginning of the year, we talked about tissues when we talked about the skin and different tissue types. So blood is a connective tissue. So blood is a tissue. There are two basic components. The first one are formed elements. These are all the cells that make up the blood, including the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. They account for approximately 45% of the blood volume. The rest of it is the plasma. This is the water, the gases, the nutrients, and things like that. And this accounts for approximately 55% of the blood volume. Okay, so this diagram is showing you a hematocrit, and a hematocrit is the volume of blood cells in a sample. It should be approximately 45%. The remaining fluid is the plasma, and that makes up about 55%. And so the way that this was determined was they put 10 milliliters of blood into a centrifuge tube, and then they spun it down, and everything that's heavy, all the blood cells, they all sink to the bottom because the centrifuge just spins it around really fast. And so down here we have all the cellular components, and that was about 45% of it. And then up top we had the plasma. So that's how we figured that out. So we're going to start by talking about the formed elements. And so there's three types of blood cells that we're going to be talking about. Red blood cells, and their scientific name is erythrocytes. There's white blood cells, and their scientific name are leukocytes, and platelets called thrombocytes. Starting with the red blood cells or erythrocytes, their function is to transport oxygen, and less than 20% of the carbon dioxide that you carry throughout your blood is carried in the red blood cells. Oxygen is carried on the hemoglobin, which is a protein found inside the red blood cell. Each red blood cell contains about 250 million or a quarter million hemoglobin molecules. Each hemoglobin molecule can bond with 4 molecules of oxygen. So that means each red blood cell has the potential to carry up to 1 billion molecules of oxygen. That's a lot of O2. Since hemoglobin is what carries the oxygen through the blood, and oxygen is a big important factor in your survival, let's talk a little bit about hemoglobin. So hemoglobin gives red blood cells their color. Each hemoglobin protein is made up of 4 polypeptide chains, so 4 subunits. Each one of those 4 subunits requires a heme pigment. And then the chemical structure of heme requires an iron. So oxygen is going to bind with the iron for transport. And so since there's 4 polypeptide subunits that each has a heme group, that's why each hemoglobin can carry 4 oxygen molecules. Whoa! Low iron is one of the causes of anemia, and anemia is a decrease in the blood's ability to carry oxygen. Follow the logic, not enough iron, so therefore not enough oxygen. Approximately 65% of all the iron in your body is found in hemoglobin. The hemoglobin protein comes in 2 forms. One is the oxyhemoglobin, and that is when oxygen is attached to hemoglobin, it takes on a very bright red color. The other one is deoxyhemoglobin, and when there's no oxygen attached to the hemoglobin, it takes on a dark red color. At no point is your blood ever blue. It's either a bright red or a dark red. Bright red in the arteries and dark red in the veins. However, when we talk about veins and arteries, typically we see veins are colored in red to indicate oxygenated, and veins are colored blue to indicate deoxygenated. And somehow that urban legend got spread that blood is actually blue until it hits the air. And that is so false, because when you're having blood drawn from you, if it actually was hitting air, that would mean that you could have an embolism because the blood draw was done incorrectly. So no, 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 blood is never, ever, ever, ever blue. All right, next up we have the leukocytes, the white blood cells, and there are many different types of leukocytes and they each have specific functions. So the first type of white blood cells are the granulocytes. They are larger, they don't live a whole long time. They live longer than erythrocytes, and erythrocytes usually live between 90 and 120 days. They have lobed nuclei, and they contain granules that will stain in the presence of right stains. So it's really easy to see them when we have a blood smear under the microscope. Then there's agranulocytes, and these nuclei are spherical or kidney shaped, and they don't stain under the right stain. So granular and agranular are two of the divisions of leukocytes, and then within those there's different types of white blood cells that we're going to be talking about. So this is just to kind of show you that breakdown, and now we're going to talk about lymphocytes and monocytes and basophils and neutrophils and eosinophils. Okay, so let's start with the granulocytes. First up, we have the neutrophils. They make up 50 to 70% of your white blood cell population. They are attracted to sites of inflammation, and they contain a protein called defensins, and it acts like an antibiotic. So these cells are going to basically destroy bacteria and some fungi by phagocytosis, which if you didn't learn that in biology, it's a fancy way for the white blood cell essentially eats the bacteria or fungi, which is pretty awesome. The next type of granulocytes that we're talking about are eosinophils. They make up about 2 to 4% of your white blood cell population. And their job is to kill parasitic worms that are inserted in food or through the skin. They lessen in severity of allergies, so they phagocytize immune complexes involved in allergy attacks, and they inactivate inflammatory chemicals released during allergy attacks to help suppress your allergies. So basophils are fairly rare white blood cells. They constitute about 0.5 to 1% of the leukocyte population. They have histamine containing granules. So histamine is an inflammatory chemical that acts as a vasodilator, and it attracts other leukocytes to the site of inflammation. So their job is basically to cause a reaction. So now on to the agranulocytes. The first one is the lymphocytes. So these make up about 25% or more of your white blood cell population. So this makes it the second most numerous white blood cell in your blood. Most are found in lymph tissue as opposed to in the blood. So these lymphocytes can be broken down into subdivisions, and there's more than just the ones here, but I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the ones you may be more familiar with or the ones that are a little more important. The T cells, their job is to mount an immune response against viruses and cancer cells, and they do this through cell-mediated immune response. The other type of lymphocyte that's really important are B cells, and these produce antibodies released into the blood to attack foreign antigens. So this is the humoral immune response. Okay, so next up and last of all, we have the monocytes. These are agranulocytes. They constitute 3 to 8% of your white blood cell population. These white blood cells actually leave your bloodstream and they go into the body tissues. Once they get into those tissues, they differentiate into macrophages that will eat viruses, they'll eat certain intracellular bacteria, and they help stop chronic infections. More about these leukocytes if and when we get to the immune system, but this year I'm not really optimistic we'll get to the immune system. The last formed element are the platelets. They're also known as the thrombocytes. These are tiny cells that are going to die within 10 days if they're not involved in clotting. So they have the shortest lifespan of any of the formed elements. These are made from fragments of megakeratinocytes. So they contain granules. Those granules possess an array of chemicals that are involved in blood clotting, such as calcium, serotonin, several enzymes, and many different clotting factors. Clotting occurs when blood vessels are ruptured or the lining is injured. So platelets form a temporary plug until a new permanent portion of the blood vessel can be fixed. And when you fall down and you have a bruise that's internal bleeding, or if you fall down and you scrape your knee or whatever and you're actually bleeding, this is what's happening, is that those platelets are coming in and forming a temporary plug. Now, if you skin your knee, you're going to see an actual scab that's formed of clotting factors and platelets and many other things. But when you bruise yourself, it's internal bleeding. And so the same process is taking place, but it's just doing it internally, so you don't actually see a scab. Hemostasis is a very fancy word, but all it means is blood clotting. And there's 3 stages to blood clotting. The first one is vascular spasms. So there's a constriction of the damaged blood vessel, and serotonin is responsible for this. This, if you remember, is a hormone, and it can also be a neurotransmitter. Its job is to cause that blood vessel to constrict, to get smaller. Platelets then come in, that's step 2, and they form a plug. The platelets are going to temporarily seal off the area and seal that break in the vessel wall. And the last step is coagulation. So blood clotting is going to take place where fibrogen gets converted to fibrin due to the enzyme thrombin, which also comes from platelets. So hemostasis is a really important thing to have happen, but sometimes it doesn't work the way we hope it would work. For instance, when it goes wrong, you could have a thrombus, which is a blood clot, and that's abnormal, that you don't want that blood clot. Or it could result in an embolus. That's where the clot moves from one place to another. Both of these can cause problems. As you can see in that diagram there, if it gets in a narrow blood vessel, it can actually cause the blood supply to stop flowing to that area. So that's all you really need to know for right now about the formed elements in blood. So let's talk about the other 55% of the blood, which is the plasma. Plasma is made up of approximately 90% water. Also found in the plasma is albumin. It's a protein that exerts osmotic pressure between the blood and the body tissues so that all the water doesn't just go rushing out of the blood and into the cells. Albumin is also very common in eggs, and so some people have an allergic reaction to eggs because of the albumin protein. And typically the people that have allergic reaction to eggs because of the albumin problem also can't be vaccinated. And so that's where that herd mentality of vaccinations, where I'm not allergic to eggs, so I get my vaccines, and that helps protect those that can't get the vaccines, comes from. Also in blood plasma, you'll find globulins. They're a group of proteins that consists of antibodies and proteins that are going to bind and transport lipids, vitamins, and other metal ions, like calcium and potassium, sodium, chlorine, things like that. Also found in the plasma is fibrinogen, and it is a clotting protein that's going to help the platelets when they need to form a clot. Also found in the blood plasma are nitrogen waste products. When your cells perform cellular respiration, they are going to make nitrogen waste. They're also going to do that when they break down proteins and metabolize proteins. So they're going to make nitrogen waste. That nitrogen waste gets put into the bloodstream. The bloodstream then carries it to the kidneys. The kidneys then filters the nitrogen waste out and puts it into your urine so that you can excrete it through urine. Forms of nitrogen waste include urea, uric acid, ammonia, and creatinine. Also found in the plasma are nutrients from the digestive system that need to be carried to the tissues of the body. These include things like sugars and carbohydrates, amino acids to make new proteins, and vitamins. Also found in the plasma are electrolytes, and that's just a fancy way of saying ions. So you have sodium, potassium, chlorine, things like that. Those are all ions that are being transported through the plasma. These ions help maintain osmotic pressure, and they also help make the blood pH normal, because carbon dioxide is going to mess with the blood pH. So plasma will also carry respiratory gases. That includes some oxygen, but most of the oxygen is going to be transported through red blood cells. But the vast majority of carbon dioxide, which is a waste product of metabolism, so when your cells perform cellular respiration, they make carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide gets transported by your blood to your respiratory system to be breathed out. The way that it does it, though, is that the carbon dioxide dissolves in water. And so when the carbon dioxide comes into that 90% water that makes up that makes up 90% of the plasma, it's going to make carbonic acid, which is not super stable, dissolved in water. So that carbonic acid is going to break up and make bicarbonate and a hydrogen ion. And those two molecules are going to be transported to your respiratory system, to your lungs, where it will diffuse across the cell membrane in your lungs, and then it will be breathed out. All right, so there's one more topic we need to talk about with blood. It's hematopoiesis, and that's a fancy way of saying making blood cells. So this takes place in red marrow, and that red marrow is found in the epiphysis of long bones, which we talked about in the skeletal system. So at the ends of all your long bones, there is red marrow, and that red marrow is going to be used to make new blood cells. So in that red marrow, you're going to find a pluripotent, so it has the potential to make multiple different types of cells, hematopoietic, so again, making blood cells, stem cell, and that cell is called a hemocytoblast, and it divides to make more hemocytoblasts so that we can continue making more blood cells, and it's also going to be able to make all the different types of blood cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Which blood cell gets made is going to depend on hormones, so a chemical signal that the red marrow receives, as well as growth factors that are going to push a cell towards specializing in either red blood cell, white blood cell, or platelet. All right, so this is a quick diagram that's going to tell you a little bit about how that original stem cell can develop into many different types of cells. So here's that original stem cell here, and depending on the signals it can get, it can go this way. I'm going to start this way, and it can become a common lymphoid progenitor. And so then this cell has the potential of developing either into a natural killer cell, which are your granular lymphocytes, or it could develop into a small lymphocyte, and those can then specialize into T cells and B cells. However, if the hormones are signaling to go the opposite way, we go to the common myeloid progenitor. And so that's where we can develop into, let's start with this megakaryocyte, and that develops into all of our platelets, or it could develop into red blood cells, or it could develop into mast cells. We're not going to really talk about what those are. Or it can develop into a myoblast, which is the stem cell to become the basophils, the neutrophils, the eosinophils, and the macrophages produced by the monocytes. So all things in your body have a lifespan. Red blood cells typically have a lifespan somewhere between 100 and 120 days. They will become rigid and fragile, and the hemoglobin starts to break down. They get trapped in smaller circulatory channels when this happens, especially the spleen. And there they get phagocytized by macrophages and get destroyed. So remember those macrophages, they're going to basically eat the damaged and old red blood cells. However, your body is really good at recycling things that it needs. So the heme that was in the hemoglobin is going to get split from the globin. The iron is going to get saved and reused when new red blood cells get made. And the heme that was made, that pigment, is going to get broken down. It gets broken down into bilirubin, which has a yellow color, and it's going to bind to the albumin that we see in the plasma of the blood, and there it can be transported to the kidneys for excretion. And so that's why oftentimes your first pee in the morning is a little darker. It's because it's a buildup of some of that bilirubin from red blood cells being destroyed while you were resting. Well, that's all I have to tell you about blood for right now. I know that was a lot of information to digest, but I'm bummed because digestive system's coming. I hope it makes sense, and if it doesn't, you know how to contact me to ask any questions of anything that didn't make sense. I hope you have a great week, and let me know if you have any issues. Bye guys, I love you, I miss you.